This week, we are talking about how to change careers to web development after hitting 30 years old. And even if you're not in your 30s, there's going to be some really good stuff for everybody. Are you ready? Let's go! What is up, everyone, and welcome to another week, another episode of the Self-Made Web Designer Podcast. My favorite part of every week is hanging out with you. And we've got another great episode ready for you right now. You know, starting anything new is tough. It's tough to see other people who are so much further along than you are. It's tough to realize that the work that you're doing, even though you're working really hard to do it and to learn new things, that the work that you're doing isn't all that great at the moment because you're so new. It can get pretty demotivating. So how do you keep going? Well, that's exactly what I talk about with a self-made web designer listener this week named Bryce. Bryce is 34 and he's working to become a web developer. But like everyone else who's just getting started, he's wondering how to navigate through comparing yourself to others and wishing that you're further along. So we're going to talk about it. Hey, if you want to talk, I'm available for free 15-minute chats. No sales pitch, no strings attached at all. We can chat about anything. We can chat about freelancing, web design, development, or anything you want. If you want to talk about baking or football, I'm up for it. I don't know a lot about either of those things, but I'd be happy to have the conversation. I'll leave a link in the show notes for you to sign up for a time to have a convo, or you can head to selfmadewebdesigner.com, scroll all the way down and click on the link that says, let's set up a phone call. All right. Are you ready to hear my conversation with Bryce about how to successfully break into a web development career after 30? Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, so I just kind of randomly heard you through a podcast, just kind of looking for some resources for some, I guess, kind of tips for beginners who may be older in age. And I heard yours, yeah, I saw you were a worship pastor, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I'll listen to this story. So hopped on there and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of, I guess, like fear and uncertainty when you start something relatively new at, an age above 30. So I just kind of wanted to kind of take the opportunity and kind of step out on a limb and like reach out to people who normally maybe I wouldn't, just kind of get advice. But yeah, I guess one of the questions I had for you was, since you did start at a later age, I'm sure you saw a lot of people's work that are younger than you, and you probably were thinking, man, like, that site's amazing, or that work is amazing, and feeling like you're already like 10 steps behind because you're already, 32, and this kid's like 25 years old and creating these amazing projects. I guess, how did you mentally and like psychologically deal with that factor of also knowing, just learning, development is hard anyways, regardless of your age. So how did you kind of manage that challenge in your mind?
Yeah. No, that's a great and a very unique question. And I still, to this day, look at guys who are younger than me who are just crushing it. And I have that sinking feeling of like, oh my God, I should just quit and give them all my business, So it's I don't know that it's something that ever goes away. And like, let's say I started when I was 19. There's always going to be somebody that's a few steps ahead of you. And I think that's just something you kind of have to come to grips with. But the thing that keeps me going is the underlying motivation. So the why behind it all for me. And so, like, for instance, right now with Self-Made Web Designer, my motivation is to help people who are like you, who are finding themselves in their 30s or whatever, and they're trying to figure out how to switch gears and do something different. And so to be a motivation for them to say, hey, keep going, you're going to get better. And I think another thing is like looking back on my designs just a couple of years ago and seeing the improvement, like I think that kind of helps to motivate me. And so I think you have to compete, but compete more with yourself than you compete with anybody else. Because, man, like if you are constantly looking at other folks, and I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's wrong to look at other folks and see what they're doing and be inspired, or maybe even be a little challenged. And say, man, I want to get there one day, even though that guy's, 15 years younger than I am. And so I think, but not doing that so much to where you go, well, I'm worth nothing, but doing it in such a way where it gives you a little bit of challenge, but then, looking back at your past work and going, man, I've come so far. And I think, another thing is, anytime you're learning anything new, right? And this is not just for web design, but this is for everything in life. And I tend to find myself, I was talking about this with my wife just the other day. Like I tend to find myself always learning something and being out of my depth and like saying yes to something I have no clue about what I should be doing with it. But you got to have a lot of grace for yourself, and realize like you're going to suck probably for a long time. And then when you start not sucking, like you're not even going to know, like it's just all of a sudden you're going to start getting better. And to you, like you're seeing yourself in really small snippets of time. It's kind of like watching yourself grow as a kid. Like you don't feel like you're growing, but then you meet some relative who hasn't seen you in 5 years and like, oh my gosh, you've gotten so big, so giving yourself a lot of grace, not getting discouraged. And I think at the end of the day, there's this element of like, I'm going to keep going no matter how crappy it feels that people are so far ahead of me, and so just like saying, oh, well, like it is what it is. Like I've got my motivation, I've got some business and I'm growing, so I think those are the things that kind of have kept me going. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, that's good. And yeah, I find myself, over the past 5 to 7 years, like kind of dipping my foot in the ocean, seeing, oh, this ocean's freezing, it's huge, it's not comfortable. And I've always had I've always had a job or some reason not to, because like, oh, I'm fine, I can pay my bills, I can, do a few of the things I want to do. So there's never, yeah, I've never, as much as I've wanted to, I've never like fully dove in. And web development, you have to dive in. You can't just like, do Code Academy for a couple lessons and then dip out. And I find myself always thinking like, as I'm getting older, I'm 34, which I think I have a good attitude toward age, and like being in my low 30s. I'm like, yeah, I feel like I have a lot I can still do, which I think is good. And I always find myself looking, oh man, when I was 31 and I wanted to like consider doing this, I was like, I should have done it then. And when I was that age, is when I was 27, I should have done it. And I'm always thinking, if I just would have done this 3 years ago, I'd be happy now. So I'm kind of thinking of my future self of like, when I'm 37, what am I going to say about, 34, which is where I am now. So kind of like using that as motivation.
Yeah. I think that's good. And I would also say like, even at 34, I just turned 39 this past week. So I'm knocking on the door of 40. But you have something to offer outside of just the development skills or the design skills that a 20-year-old wouldn't be able to offer, right? They wouldn't be able to offer the perspective that you have. There's probably some time management that you have dialed in. There's some empathy that you've got with different clients that they're not going to be able to have. Like you're going to be able to empathize with other folks who are in their 30s and at the same stage of life as you are, that a 20-year-old might not be able to do just because they don't have that experience. And so, I think it's better to look and say, rather than what do I lack in comparison to these folks, you say, okay, what are my core competencies? What are my differentiating alternatives that I can tell clients and say, hey, listen, I'm in my 30s. I'm just getting started with this. You might be able to hire a 20-year-old who is cheaper, but here's what I offer, right? Like this is what I bring to the table. And I think another part of it is that, like, yeah, I think it's societal's pressure to like be incredibly, like, if we haven't reached it by 40, if we haven't hit that success mark, then it's like we're screwed, but it's just not true. Like there's like only in this season of life have you had to have it all figured out by the time you were 35, right? And in fact, there's a great book I'd encourage you to check it out. It's called Late Bloomers. And it just talks about all the different folks who they actually didn't even find what they wanted to do for the rest of their lives until they were in their 40s, late 30s, 50s, 60s, so that was super encouraging to me. And I read it a couple of years ago. So like there's the gal who wrote Harry Potter, she didn't write that until she was, much, much older and already had a career and got a divorce and had to figure out a way how to make money. And so she tried becoming an author, and now, look at her. So there's so many circumstances of like, man, no matter how old you are, like if I was in my 40s, I would still be saying the same thing. And it does get discouraging, for sure. Like when I've got folks who are younger than me, who are outbidding me or doing way better than I am. There's a guy, I think he was 20 years old, and he's got like 130,000 followers on Instagram as a UX designer. And I'm like, good God, So, but you just got to keep going, because eventually you'll get there. And, like as I've gone, people start falling off. People start going, hey, I'm going in this direction. And so then I kind of come up in the ranks, so to speak. So, it's just kind of a natural thing that happens.
Well, I guess, yeah, that 15 minutes went pretty quick. I guess really, really quickly, and this doesn't need to be a long answer, just what are some of the things like practical tools you wish you would have, looked at as you were early in the process that you're like, oh, I should have checked out Bootstrap more, or like learned more about like to the terminal line or whatever, just like little things like that. If you could give me a few of those like things you wish you would have.
Yeah. It's a tough one because there's so many diverse things out there. And I don't know that there's one good answer. What I will say is I wish I would have been more project focused from the very beginning, rather than like, let me go learn this thing, like I'm going to go learn, like what you're saying, Bootstrap or, command line or GitHub or whatever. Like I always think it's better to find a project, even if it's outside the realm of what and then learn into that project, because that's going to put some context into what you're learning and how you're learning it. And I've taken the courses, I've taken the Bootstrap, I've taken all that stuff. And I learned more from actually having to go out and take a problem that was in front of me and figure out some tool to like fix that problem, And so if that were Bootstrap, if it were CSS Grid or Flexbox or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
and there's so many that you might know all of them, but I'm sure there are a ton you don't know, and like, or even know about. And yeah, I feel like there's like, it's a forest, and like kind of making your way through it. It's like, there's things that are good and useful in these cases, but is that something I should look at now, or is that down the line once I need it, I'll, tap into that? And yeah, I guess, yeah, being project like focused and trying to slowly do that, yeah, things will naturally be like, oh, I need to figure this out.
Right. And I think too, it sounds like you probably got some fear about, am I going to spend a lot of effort working on this thing and learning it and then it not being valuable? But I think they're all of the frameworks are all real similar, right? And so once you learn one framework, it's not too tough to move into a different one, right? And so, because you kind of see like, okay, they're doing this thing, and then, oh, they're doing the same thing, they just have a different language for it, or a different class, or a different whatever, component, or however they're kind of mixing it all together. So So I wouldn't worry about like wasted effort too much because, man, you never know what's going to come down the line and blow everything out of the water. Like bootstrap is becoming more and more obsolete, whereas like 5 years ago, that's all anybody wanted to work with, And so who knows? Like you just kind of have to take a guess, go with it, and then take whatever skills you've learned from and then kind of pivot as it changes. Man, I hope you were encouraged by my conversation with Bryce. No matter where you are or how old you are or whatever, you gotta know that it is never too late to break into a tech career. I did it, and you can do it too. You've just got to keep going when you get discouraged. So if you're discouraged when you're listening to this, wishing you were further ahead than where you are right now, let's chat for a second. Come close. I want to encourage you, okay? You've just got to keep going. You're going to look back one day and see the progress that you've made, and you're going to be encouraged. You're going to be surprised. You're going to be thrilled with how far you've come. But that all starts with a decision right now, as you're listening to this, to just stick with it. I know you can do it, and I'm cheering you along the entire way. All right, that's it for this week. If you haven't already, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the Self-Made Web Designer podcast. That way you get a fresh new episode in your pocket every single week. Like next week, we've got another awesome podcast happening. It's dropping at 12 a.m., and it's going to be tons of fun. Until then, keep working hard, and don't forget, if you don't quit, you win.